Hello, everyone. Just give it a few moments. Hi, Samke.
Hi, Taban, how are you?
Are you able to hear me?
Perfectly, I can.
Good, 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 good. Thank you. Perfect, perfect. Okay, so we're a few minutes, sorry, delayed on my end, but officially welcome. Thank you so much for joining this conversation. Truly honored to be able to speak to you. I think just from the incredible journey you've walked, but I won't run ahead and talk about that now. We can unpack it in our conversation. Um, so just a bit of an intro to Samke. I think you may have seen from our socials and posts. Samke is a medical doctor. She's an author of a book called Conversations of a Convoluted Mind. You'll clarify for me, Samke. But yeah, done incredible things. Has founded a Vocal Mentality, which is a platform where she journeys or details some of her own journey around wellness, and a whole host of other things. But Samke, I think as a opening note for our discussion, is just hi, Samke.
I'm here, I'm here. I'm still here.
Samke, can you hear me? Okay, great. Sorry, it's just a bit of a delay on my end. Okay, so as a bit of a parting note, or point of departure, I was listening to an interview you gave on a platform with a panel of medical experts, and I thought you said something in that I thought was very interesting. And I want us to kick off a little bit with what you feel your purpose is in life. And you said about your vocation, you said that medicine chose you and you did not choose medicine. Please unpack a little bit for us. What inspired that? What does that mean?
So it simply means that my ultimate dream was never to be a doctor to start off with. So I never saw myself with an injection and a stethoscope or anything of that sort. I always found a fascination with writing on the board. So the dream was to be a teacher primarily. And it took for me to have my first bipolar episode when I was in grade nine, that my shift and redirection came into place. And I started developing an interest in medicine just for my sake. So when I say that it chose me, I don't know if the course of my life took the path that it took, or it didn't rather. I don't know if I would have been a doctor. And I love the journey, I love it, but I never thought that I would want to be a doctor. The dream was to be a teacher. And the irony of it actually is that here I am, and most of the work that I do is educational nowadays. So I guess I would call it that way.
Hi, Samke. Sorry, there's a bit of breakage. I caught a little bit of the last part of what you said. But yeah, I think the essence I got was it was your own personal wellness that inspired the journey into medicine. And maybe
Yes.
just touch a little bit on your diagnosis. You speak so openly about it, and you know why you advocate for the things that you advocate. I think it's a twofold question. One is, unpack for us a little bit about what bipolar is, what the sufferers of bipolar experience, generally speaking, and why it was important for you then, secondfold, to really sort of be on the other side, which is, being part of the medical care of dealing with such types of illness.
So just to interject a bit, I don't view myself to be a sufferer of bipolar.
Sure.
I don't see myself as somebody who's suffering with or has a condition in that way.
Yeah.
I say I'm not suffering with it, I'm thriving despite
Okay.
it, because as much as I speak about it a lot, it's a component or an element of who I am. It's not the final verdict of who I am. It's not the summary of
Right.
who I am. So, like I said to you, I didn't choose it, it chose me. And
Yeah.
I feel connected in the sense that the work that I do enables is empowering, and I feel that it fuels who I am and what I do as well. Um, I chose being a doctor, and speaking about bipolar disorder wasn't the primary thing that I always aimed to do. It was never my intention.
Mm,
I was diagnosed when I
mm,
was 14 years old, but
mm.
it was not ever my intention to speak as openly as I do now.
Sure.
It took
Yes.
having a public episode for me to decide to just be more vocal and realize that there's such a stigma related to mental health and mental illness. And I decided to not just sit on the sidelines and watch basically things that get said or spoken on our behalf,
Mm,
but to become part of
mm.
be an agent of change and be somebody who is part of the solution to the problem, basically. So
Yes.
it's a mood disorder. It exists in a spectrum, as people would describe it nowadays. And in it existing in a spectrum, you have episodes where you have fluctuating moods, excessive irritability, pacing around, pressured speech. There's a symptom cluster that exists where one can be defined as having it, but one of them is the fact that you have mania. There's two kinds of bipolar disorder, type 1 and type 2.
Yeah.
And the type 2 is when you have hypomania, so it can last about 2 weeks, the symptoms that I described, or type 1, which is the more severe one, which is the one that I have. And I'm so grateful that you spoke about me being on the other side. And I think I'd like to believe that in a sense, because there's a greater level of empowerment and an insight on my part.
Sure.
And but I have to be honest that it's an ongoing journey,
Yeah.
though. It is an
Yeah.
ongoing journey. And the people in my life know that, my goodness, we are on a lifelong journey. There's times when I'm thriving, there's times when it's a bit more challenging.
Yeah.
But I just thought I don't want to be a poster child of mental illness. I don't see myself as that. But more than anything, I choose to be an inspiration,
Good.
but also to be a relatable person with not just bipolar disorder, but mental illness overall.
Yeah. Excellent. So great. And I think that also touches on other things around the stigma. I think especially where people are openly you sort of, are transparent about what it is that they experience on a day-to-day living with a condition like bipolar, for example, and just the fact that, like you mentioned, mental illness, wellness, actually, I'd like to say, is such a broad spectrum, and at different points, I guess people are on different parts of that. But I think really more than anything, thank you for touching on your journey and how it impacted that. We will unpack about that a little bit later on. What does it mean to lead from wellness and compassion at a later stage? We'll touch on that. I want to know then from you, because I mean, so you then go and you study medicine and you go on to found Vocal Mentality, you go on to found Sisters for Mental Health. Um, I want to know from you just a little bit about what, I mean, obviously this is in the framework of what you do and what you advocate for, but why specifically those platforms and what do they mean? So how do people engage with them, and what was the heart behind founding them?
The heart behind it, and I'm not going to over spiritualize it. I'm not trying to do that, but I believe the heart behind it was God for me.
Sure.
I felt Him prompt me to take this route that I've taken in 2020. That's when I started. So I was
Sure.
clinical medicine all my career, and all my career I've always been in mental health, essentially. I mean, maybe a year or two in pediatrics, but most of my career has been in mental health care services in the Department of Psychiatry. And I felt God redirect my path in 2020 to say, this is the path you're going to take.
Mm.
There's times where you feel like you've moved from the shore, you're now in the water, and then it's like,
Yeah.
where to from here? But
Yes.
I'm in employee wellness.
Okay.
I work with different companies basically. There's different aspects to what I do. One
Okay.
of it is to engage with employees about their wellness, deal with suicide risk assessments, burnout assessments, assessing for those kinds of things. And then I work with the employee assistance programs as well.
Okay.
Then the other aspect of it is I speak in companies. Oftentimes, the corporates will find somebody who's high functioning like myself, and they find it to be inspirational and motivating to employees to realize that mental illness is not about the man on the street um, that they may think could never be functional, but they see somebody who's
Sure.
doing so much with their life and they find it to be motivating. So I shy away from saying I'm a motivational speaker. I don't identify with that, even
Yeah,
though people may say that what I say can be motivational, and I accept
sure.
that. But I believe that my work is in psychoeducation, and vocal mentality is more the business side of what I do. Sisters for Mental Health is more the non-profit, not is more, it is the
Okay.
non-profit, where we have gatherings and we meet and there's psychoeducational talks basically, and gatherings where people with lived experience also get a chance to speak and share in their journey, just to develop an understanding for other people. So there's usually different themes related to it.
Okay, awesome. And so for Sisters for Mental Health, for example, is that open to the public? Are there
Yes.
organizations you particularly work with? Okay, okay.
No, it's open
And
to
are the
everyone.
okay,
It's open to everybody. It's just that we haven't done anything this year so far. But every
okay.
year we've had hikes basically, and then maybe
Nice.
a psychiatrist will come on the day, and we will engage, do something sociable, because
Yes.
the aim is to engage about mental health in a conducive environment that's not intimidating. Because if you tell people they're going
Mm,
to meet about mental health, it can be discouraging for them because they feel like it's such a serious topic to meet on a Saturday about. So to
yes.
say that we're going to gather and have a hike and then we'll have a picnic afterwards and talk, it makes people want to join in and engage. So that's the premise of it. Like last year, we
Mm,
had a meeting at a venue. It was a lovely venue, and there was a psychiatrist, a psychologist, someone living with mental illness, and yeah, so we had different kind of disciplines or specialties addressing different aspects of it, and it was about navigating difficult emotions. And the
sure.
same thing was done the year before, basically. So that's the premise of Sisters for Mental Health: is to bring mental health education and awareness in a conducive environment that enables people to want to engage.
Sure. So good. So, so very good. And I think creating safe spaces is so important in many things, but specifically in that, because like we're saying, there's such a lack of awareness, even sometimes ignorance around being miseducated about what it really means to be living with a mental illness, for example. But yeah, that's really fantastic. And then I kind of wanted to segue then into leadership because, of course, you are at the forefront of these things. I think there are very few, perhaps a growing number of people who are as outspoken as you are, who are thriving, who are showing that you can live a full and wholesome life, irrespective of what it is that you face on a personal level or with anything else, really. And I want to know for you, what does it mean to be a leader? What does leadership mean? What are the traits that are critical from your own experience, but I guess also from observation? Yeah,
When I think of the word leadership, and you really scratched my mind, and
yeah,
then I thought, what word do I want to reflect on? And the word that comes to mind for me is empowerment, and it's the
sure,
ability to equip people with tools to be able to do what they need to do effectively, but also being accessible enough
sure.
for them to come back to you to engage with you further without feeling intimidated
Mm,
or feeling
mm,
a power dynamic that is stifling. So empowerment is the
mm.
word that comes to mind for me, basically.
Sure. Equipping, empowering. And
Mm.
it's so interesting because I think a lot of the time when people speak about leadership in particular, it's, being ahead of the pack, having all the answers, having all the solutions, having to do all the work, and simply having people who report to you or look up to you. But I love that definition of leadership because I think it's essentially what it is that we're even here for as human beings. We don't live in silos, and leadership should be equipping the next person to also thrive, which I really like. It speaks to agency, it speaks to responsibility, to accountability as well. But then we specifically talk about women because you will know that when I engaged you, this month, we on Friday in particular actually will be having a our International Women's Day, and the month really is celebrating women and the strides that women make. And as a woman who's a leader, I mean, I'm keen to hear your experiences just around this, and also maybe to double tap on whether you think women in leadership is still a relevant catchphrase. For a while, we would have brunches and lunches and conferences, that speak about this point with the understanding that women are still not leading where they should be leading. Women are still not represented accordingly in certain spaces. So I guess it's also a twofold question, but primarily it's what is it that do you still think it's relevant that we speak about women in leadership, and what makes a woman leader then outstanding?
I think it's absolutely important. It's absolutely relevant. It's going to be a very long time until it's not relevant, actually,
Sure.
because it's still a fresh thing. It's still a very new thing. I believe that until there is a balance, we shouldn't stop speaking about it. And as much as it seems like somebody said to me a while ago. They said, "Sure, there's so many lunches and brunches and this and that happening,
Mm,
but is it reflecting where it needs to reflect?" The answer is no, which means that though those kinds of gatherings are still important for people to have, to equip ourselves to engage with those topics that are relevant to us, because until it translates where it needs to translate, I don't think we can stop
yes.
speaking about it, because one can say, "Oh, we're saying it too much, we're speaking about it too much," but is it translating where it needs to translate in those positions, in those spaces? And the answer is no, which means then we still need to talk about it.
Sure. That's really good. I think the translating part is important. I was in a session on Friday, last Friday, of a group of women leaders in the legal space, and they had gone and done a survey where they detailed representation of women at different levels in different types of legal environments. And it was amazing because when you looked at the statistics, actually, as many brunches and lunches as you say, women are having and conversations and get-togethers and what seems like representation, it isn't actually translating. So thanks for touching on that, because I think there's difference between the substance of things, the substantive reality versus what is perceived,
Yes.
from what is socially portrayed about these types of things. Um, I'm interested then to know also just from the medical space, and I understand that there's different, spaces. You're in corporate currently, leading in the corporate space. Do you find that women who are medical professionals are given the space and the room to lead well, or not even just to lead well, but I think to lead in general? Is it still, because we know that there are the professions that when we go back in history were considered male, professions, lawyers, accountants, doctors, the standard professional career paths. How does the medical space account for women in leadership?
I think it varies depending on which discipline it is as well, because like you're saying, there's some space that are just predominantly male. So it'll take a while for the transformation to take place in those spaces. And I believe that it
Mm,
depends on the awareness and the empowerment of those people in those spaces to say, are we allowing women, or are we going to be gatekeepers for them to be able to, take up those spaces, take up those positions?
mm,
If a man leaves a position, will you give an opportunity to a woman? So I think we still have a very long way to go.
mm,
Transformation
mm,
is going to be met with resistance. If something has been the status quo, it's hard for it to be made to look different, basically. But I think
Yeah.
if you keep pushing in those strides, I think it's across the board in different professions, the ones that are predominantly male.
Yes.
It won't just be an automatic thing that people will roll over and give opportunity. But I think slowly and incrementally, we'll hopefully get there. I think we will get there. It's a question of when and how fast.
When.
When
Correct. Yeah.
and how fast it's happening. Is it happening fast enough? I don't think so. But
Yes.
I think we need to just give it hope that it does get better with time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, as with anything, you can have a variety of agendas and policies and things, but again, it speaks to your earlier point about how do those translate. I heard someone say recently to say the only way these beautiful agendas and things will translate into reality is when we're intentional with it, you know. That also means, you know, plugging a sister, you know, if you're in the space and we're professionals, how do we refer one another, depending on obviously how it works within the particular profession, but word of mouth, you know, spreading the word about what the next person is doing, what their capabilities are, you know, paying it forward, mentoring, and allowing others to come through the space, who wouldn't ordinarily have that opportunity to, and sharing some of your knowledge. So yeah, that's great. Another thing I wanted to touch on, because I think we talk about leadership sometimes like there's a difference between being a woman leader and a male leader, and perhaps there's truth to that to some extent, you know. So there's the perception that when you're a woman in leadership, there's a tendency towards being compassionate, considerate, you know, understanding, leading with relationship first. Now, obviously, those are stereotypes, and it may not be the case for all women leaders. I certainly have engaged with leaders who are women who are not compassionate. But I think it also touches on our topic around wellness. And I want to know, what does it mean to be well as a leader, but lead from wellness and with compassion? And why are those important? So I've selected those for our conversation, because I think it is so critical in the world we live in today in general, irrespective of whether a person is living with a mental illness or not. There are so many things that people are going through, and I think compassion and wellness are things that we don't, they're buzzwords once again, but we don't actually know what it means to show up to spaces, being kind, being considerate, you know, and being able to relate with people beyond just what they can do for you, especially in the work environment. I don't know if you can touch a little bit on that, you know, what does it look like to lead from wellness and compassion?
Well, they say that the fish rots from the head. And I'm applying the same because oftentimes people it's not only about being an example in terms of your leadership, but also if
Mm,
you are well, it trickles down. It gives
mm,
a greater chance of it trickling down to the people you are leading. Because if you're pushing
mm,
agendas related to wellness and wellness and well-being, and at the top there's an issue there, we have a
yeah,
problem, you know.
yeah,
Compassion is a virtue. It's something that's important to have, and it affects the culture of an environment. So if the leadership is not healthy, and not compassionate, and
yeah,
wellness is not a priority, it's not going to happen where it needs to also penetrate. So it's a very important thing to have, and to really engage it and prioritize, not just something
mm,
that, make it part of the, company's agenda
mm,
to
mm,
make wellness a priority,
yeah,
to make, qualities like compassion. And you were touching on the fact that women and men lead differently, and there's those assumptions that, women are softer, kinder, compassionate, and there is
mm,
a greater, well, propensity or an expectation, but that has to be something that is intentional.
mm,
It won't just,
mm,
you can have credentials that are good on paper, but it does not
mm,
mean that your character is tied up to those great qualifications. So it's
yeah,
very important that not only do you have the qualification to lead, or to have a certain role, but your character also has to tie up with being able to be effective in your role.
yeah. Yes, yeah. I guess things in corporate we would refer to as the softer skills, things that don't
Yes.
necessarily form a part of a KPI or a performance, plan, but things that just make you palatable to teammates, to other human beings in the environment that you find yourself in. Um, that's really great. Thank you for sharing that. And I mean, for you as a woman who is also a leader and is probably, on multiple levels in a position where you're required to lead, what are things that you would impart, as encouragement for women who, I mean, I think the odds or the circumstances that face us vary in our day-to-day lives. It could be really anything, including our backgrounds and some of where we come from. But what are your words of encouragement for women who want to live lives of purpose and conviction, who have big dreams, but face also very real circumstances, very real life issues? What would you say? What would be in the course of what you would say in one of your engagements? What are the things that you would say to encourage women?
I would say don't isolate. It can feel isolating and isolated, but I would say club with people who have an aligned vision with you. They may be in different
Mm,
spaces, different sectors, but don't be an island, because there are moments where you'll feel very lonely and that you
mm,
can lose steam along the way.
mm,
I found it very helpful to equip myself, be it watching something, reading something, engaging with other people, being honest about the struggles, being honest,
sure.
being vulnerable in safe spaces to say, these are the difficulties that I encounter in the role that I serve. And just to
Mm,
empower yourself, don't isolate. I would say that. And to know that, this big word, common word that I always talk about lately as well, and I've experienced and still dealing with, is imposter syndrome.
oh gosh.
That
Yeah.
worth, it boils down to worth as well. You deserve
Yeah.
to be where you
Good.
are. You deserve to be in those spaces, and align yourself with people who have a similar direction to the one that you have. So if you're a leader in whatever capacity, people might be in a different field to you, but
Mm,
maybe someone you admire. Look at what they are doing well and doing right, and equip yourself with that. Equip yourself with that knowledge. Read podcasts and find yourself plugged in where you can connect and have a community, a virtual
yes.
or a real one, or both. That's what I would
Good.
encourage.
So, so very good. So practical as well. Thank you so much. So we are at the end of our chat, and I often open this point to any questions. I know we've got a couple of people online. Um, I don't see any, but as a parting shot, I think maybe I'll have a final question from me personally. Something else that you did say in an interview, I think it was also the same interview I was watching, and you spoke about truth and vulnerability and the importance of showing up to spaces in that way. I thought that was really powerful because you just touched on imposter syndrome, for example, and a lot of what feeds things like that is us not feeling like who we are authentically is good enough to be in certain spaces. So showing up as who we genuinely are with our unique traits, even in leadership, I think there's a certain way you understand, for example, being a leader, you're being a woman, that we tend to show up in these modified ways. But I thought it was really interesting when you spoke about showing up being truthful and vulnerable. And I think you just spoke a little bit to it now about the honesty, being honest about the struggles. A lot of women I've found don't feel that they can always be as honest and vulnerable depending on which. But one power I think women have really mastered when we're together is we can get a good conversation going. I will know things about you when there's a space for us to do that. I just want to know, do you have experiences where you have been really challenged to show up with truth and being vulnerable? And how have you navigated spaces with other women in that respect?
Mm. I I believe that, it can vary in terms of,
Mm,
can get to and arrive in a space that is so
mm,
embracing and so encouraging, and you can
mm.
arrive to a space that's not, and for whatever the reasons are, it might not necessarily be resistance as such, but just because people have their own personal issues about vulnerability within themselves. So I may come
Yes.
forward with my vulnerability, but
Yeah.
the people who I'm engaging with have a barrier that they have for themselves, a protective one that says they're not going to allow themselves to be visible enough for whatever their reasons are. So
Mm.
it can vary in that way basically,
Right.
and I believe that when people see Dr. Samke Ngcobo, I don't think they always resonate only or primarily only with the DR title. There are many doctors out there,
Sure.
but they resonate with the human side that says, "Oh, she is that. I can be that too." And it's because I'm truthful about my struggles, I'm truthful about my journey, I'm truthful about my triumphs, strengths, failures, all of those things. That's what people connect with. They connect with the person behind the work, the title. They're
Mm.
not connecting with vocal
Mm.
mentality. They're not connecting with the DR title, but they are connecting with the person who they see mirrors them. And I believe that
Right.
that's why it's so important for me to remain that way.
So good. Relatability. Yeah, and I mean,
Yes.
even just in our conversation in closing, I really do sense that. And thank you for being so transparent and honest and showing up to those spaces. I think it does empower other people when we show up as ourselves. It's almost like this disarming thing that allows you to also show up accordingly. So thank you, Samke. We are past our time and I didn't want to waste any more of yours, but thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for sharing. Happy International Women's Month to you and
Thank
wishing you
you.
all of the best with your endeavors.
Thank you so much for inviting me to your lovely platform. I pray that it grows and
Thank you.
thrives, and may you continue to be the powerful dialoguer that you are.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you, Samke. Cheers, everyone.
Bye.